Hello, everybody. Welcome on this February 7th, 2021, to this Disney special. Why is it a Disney special today? Well, today is the 81st anniversary, I think, of the premiere of Disney's 1940 film, Pinocchio. And so this video is going to be lessons in Lent, but we're taking our wisdom from this story that I saw as a child a long time ago, and I don't think I ever saw it again after I first saw it as a kid. But I revisited it the other night. I threw it on, and boy, let me tell you, it was a fun story as a child, but I think it was more fun as an adult because the richness, the symbolism, and all the meaning that's in this story is so rich and means so much as a Christian that I just found myself just totally wrapped up in it and loving it. And I just knew, okay, we got to do something with this this film. So this is as we head into our Lent season, right? If you haven't heard much about Lent, it's a turning away from the old self and turning towards the new as we head towards the cross and Easter and look towards our resurrection life. We find ourselves trying to move that direction in ourselves, to look into ourselves and say, man, what are the things that don't look like Jesus right now? And kind of make this 40-day push of sprinting towards the cross in the race we run of the Christian life. So that's what that is. And Pinocchio, of all things, I think this story has so much to tell us with regard to that story that we're all living out, because this is the story that Pinocchio lives out. And if you don't remember the story, it's about a wooden puppet, a marionette, that is crafted by this Italian woodworker named Geppetto, and he makes this beautiful doll, and he's so thrilled by it, but it doesn't quite satisfy his creative desires. He, who embodies this lovely spirit of who a father should be, he has no son for real, and he would love Pinocchio to be a real son. So he prays one night upon a star that Pinocchio would be a real boy. And so who visits him but the blue fairy, right? Who, like an angel, comes in and grants Geppetto's wish. But here's the thing: it's not just, hey, all right, let's make him a real boy, right? She gives the power to Pinocchio to see this wish come true. Right? She puts it in his hands to a degree. And she says to him, prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and you will be a real boy. That's who real boys are called to be, right? But Pinocchio is still this wooden marionette, but he's got no strings anymore. And he can almost in the same way that a human boy could, he's able to kind of move around by his own self-will, and now he's given the power to choose from right and wrong. This is what makes humanity distinct from the rest of creation. Is we have the power to reason, to choose right from wrong, and more than that, to self-actualize who we are meant to be by virtue of that knowledge and the choices we make and how we live our lives. We're able to move towards Christ or move away from him. This is our story, and so Pinocchio is given that power as well. He's given the ability to move towards who he was meant to be, or to choose the things of the world. Right? If you're not convinced that this is the Christian story, just let me quick read to you out of 1 Peter, first chapter here. Sorry, 2 Peter, first chapter. Verse 3. His divine power has given us everything needed for life and godliness. Right? So by God's power, everything that is needed for life and godliness has been given to us. Right? Through the knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Thus he has given us, through these things, his precious and very great promises, so that through them you may escape from the corruption that is in the world because of lust, and may become participants in the divine nature. For this reason, you must take every effort to support your faith with goodness with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with endurance, and endurance with godliness, and godliness with mutual affection, and mutual affection with love. Right? So our calling is not to follow the corruption and the lust and the passion of the world, but to move towards our divine calling, to be partakers of the divine nature. Right? Not to be of the flesh, but to be of the Spirit. Right? To be called to something higher than what we are now, but more towards what we are becoming. Right? And the way we do that is to put off the things of the world and to put on the things of the Spirit that ultimately find themselves culminated in love. Right? So this is our calling. Right? In the same way that Pinocchio, even there as a wooden doll who's been given life, is not yet a real boy, but he's given what he's needed to become so. Right? The same is true for us if we listen to the Spirit and we follow his guidance. This is what's given to Pinocchio. Jiminy Cricket comes down, and the blue fairy, she gives Jiminy Cricket this new calling to be Pinocchio's conscience. She says to him, I dub you, Pinocchio's conscience, Lord High Keeper of the knowledge of right and wrong, counselor in moments of temptation, and guide along the straight and narrow path. Right? I just can't get more biblical than that, honestly. That's his conscience, which, Jiminy Cricket says is the still small voice that nobody's listening to these days. That's our still small voice. Deeper than a conscience, it's the Holy Spirit within us, right? That's what we're to follow if we want to become real boys, right? Who we're meant to be, partakers of the divine nature. Well, Pinocchio sets out on this path, and he goes astray a couple of times, right? And so we find that as he, runs into these different temptations where he's tested and actually found to be untruthful at times, his nose grows, and he starts to look more and more like a tree, right? It becomes this branch that's got a nest in it, right? As he lies. This is a deformation of who he's meant to look like, right? And as he lies and as he turns away from his conscience, the Spirit's calling on his life, he looks less and less human and more like the base ingredients that he's made out of: wood, a tree, right? Later on, he encounters these characters, these kind of like almost demonic type figures, ultimately is what they are, that are, haranguing him and trying to get him to go on a different path, right? They ship him off to Pleasure Island. And before they do, they set up this council, the demon council of the fox and the guy and the cat, right? And they're plotting what they're going to do to Pinocchio. And I love this scene. It's so funny. Like it's this picture of just, the vain worldly pursuits, right? So you've got the cat there, and he's smoking a cigar, and he's got a smoke ring donut that he dips The beer. I just think it's brilliant. Anyway, but they plot against Pinocchio, right? And the main guy, who, I don't know, maybe he's the devil or something. He says, don't worry, because after we ship them off to Pleasure Island, they never come back real boys, right? And we know what happens to them there. The more time that these children spend on Pleasure Island, they start to, they take these faceless kind of forms that are just, going after all their own pursuits and desires. And they, as they spend more time there, they become less and less human. And they start kind of devolving into donkeys, right? Asses. Sprouting ears and tails and ultimately losing the ability to speak. So, again, we have this picture of he turns away from his calling to be a real boy, to be who he was meant to be, called to be, and becomes less and less something that can't even speak. Earlier on in the film, he gets put on stage in this sort of caravan, gypsy show or whatever. And he sings this song, which is ironic, right? Because he's lost his strings, right? And he's sort of given life. But the strings he lost, which are, strings that hold him up, right? And make him, look like a real boy, right? He's kind of inverted this. And he's saying, I have no strings to hold me down, right? And so what the strings would do, which, the things that, are pulling us up towards who we're meant to be, right? Making us look, and act the way, in a higher way that we ought to be. He sees them in this moment as being strings to hold him down. He sings this song. He says, I've got no strings to hold me down, to make me fret or make me frown. I had strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me. He's got, the strings that he's lost, right? Which are essentially, the gift of freedom to, the strings could hold you up and make you do these things to look like a real boy. But the Boot Fairy gave you the power to look like a real boy, right? To act like that. But now he's saying, the freedom I have, this freedom of the no strings, these aren't holding me down anymore, right? So he's inverted it, and he's not going after what it is to look human, right? He's saying, all that was holding me down, not holding him up. And he says, hi-ho the merry-o, that's the only way to be. I want the world to know nothing ever worries me. I've got no strings, so I have fun. I'm not tied up to anyone. They've got strings, but you can see there are no strings on me. So all these other people that are, doing kind of what everybody else wants them to do, they've got the strings. I don't have the strings. Nothing ever pulls me down, right? I've got no worries. I have fun. He's just going after himself, his own desires, right? Isn't this what the world tells us? The freedom that you've been given, the freedom that allows you to, by the power of the Spirit and the knowledge of good that's been given to you, to be able to act and participate in the divine nature, right? The world says, don't go after that. Go after what you want, right? Go after what's fun. Go after what feels good. Nobody ever can get in your way. Nobody can tell you otherwise. You got no strings holding you down. The gospel message is something different, right? Because the gospel teaches us that if we live our life like that and we make that our song, that we won't become free. In fact, we will be in a cage, turning into our baser forms and our baser ingredients, nose growing and not looking like who to look like. Now we will lose all semblance of humanity, and we will eventually lose our ability to speak and resemble who it is that we were called to be. People fashioned in God's image, truthful, brave, and unselfish. Well, here's the thing: is Pinocchio's journey doesn't end there, but he does find himself finally listening to Jiminy Cricket and the word of truth that's been given to him. And he does what a real boy does. A real boy in all the sense of what a real boy is called to be: brave, truthful, unselfish, right? And he plunges into the belly of a whale to save his father. I'm going to get choked up right here because it's such a transformation, and it's what we're called to do. What is the belly of the whale? It's so in our face. It's the sign of Jonah, who went down into the belly of the whale, went down its throat, spent 3 days there, and came up and finally did what he was called to do. That Jesus went down into the grave for 3 days, the sign of Jonah. And when he arose, he changed the world and he changed our path. But Jesus calls us to go on that path as well. All right? I'm going to read from Matthew. Okay, so we have Matthew 16, 25. What was it? Yeah, Matthew 16. And it's verse 24. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." Pinocchio gave up his life to save his father. And he lost his life. He's washed up on the beach, dead and lifeless. He went into the belly of the whale and he faced death. And this is what we're all called to do. Deny ourselves and plunge headlong into the thing that maybe scares us the most. Give up our own sense of safety and all the things that we would want to pursue after to make us feel good. But to give it all up in the name of selfless love, to love another, and ultimately to follow Christ in that love, to be like Christ, and to become a partaker of the divine nature by doing what only Christ would do, following him into death. And of course, the story doesn't end there. Geppetto brings Pinocchio back, lays him on the bed. And as Pinocchio probably had breathed his last, he becomes a real boy. That's our calling. And that's what I would just challenge you to do this Lent. Dive down the throat of the whale. Follow Christ where he went. Deny yourself. Deny everything but Christ and giving love to those around you. Do this Lent. Die to self and be raised anew on Easter, a resurrected life. That's the gospel. See y'all there.